It's a great pleasure and honor to be with one of the most exciting and transformative jewelers and my very favorite fashion icon in the world on the same panel talking about creativity and collaboration. So I thought we'd start, Sean, with just some images of your work and have you talk a little bit about how you got into jewelry and how you developed your own style.
Okay, indeed. I'll take this. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, do I need to hold that?
I think it probably helps.
Oh, help. There we go. Okay, good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for coming. I'll take you on a little journey of my story. I was classically trained from a very young age, the age of 15. I worked at a very beautiful atelier in Hatton Garden, which is a jewellery quarter in London, and I started a goldsmithing apprenticeship, a 7-year apprenticeship, and I worked for an atelier that created jewellery, very high-end fine jewellery for some of the most prestigious stores on Bond Street for royal families all over the world, our royal family, the Middle Eastern royal families. And we created some of the most beautiful, high-end, fine jewellery. So you can imagine I was very classically trained. I started at 15, and by the age of 18, I was making diamond tiaras for Aspreys. So it gives you a real feel of the kind of work that I was working on. We used to do a lot of antique restoration as well, as you can see. So there was a part of our business where we did antique restoration, and I was head of that department because to restore antique jewelry you have to be really patient and fine work, and patience is key because if you speed on repairing a piece like that you can very easily destroy it. So restoring antique jewelry was where I found a passion for design. Before that I was a craftsman and I was crafting for Garrard's, Aspreys, Van Cleef. I was making what I was told to make. I wasn't allowed to design any pieces at this point. But then when I started doing antique restoration, I found this passion inside me grew for understanding design, because I'd be restoring Victorian pieces, Art Nouveau, Art Deco, and those pieces were so distinctive of their time and the period, and they weren't too far apart from each other either in time, but I found this real yearning in me. God, I really wish I could create pieces that reflected the time that we were in. And then this hunger for design was born in me. But being a trained goldsmith and doing what I was told to do by the big houses, there was this hunger for design that came in me. These are some samples of some of the pieces I was making at 18. So I took to crafting fine high-end jewellery like a duck to water. It was there was an energy in me that I loved creating pieces that I knew would be around a lot longer than I was. Then came the moment of serendipity when I met Alexander McQueen. I was 22 years old, and I had just finished my apprenticeship in Hatton Garden. It was a 7-year apprenticeship, and Lee, Alexander McQueen, friends called him Lee. He was at Central St Martin's. He was just doing his MA in fashion, and we became best of friends. And it was a really special moment because we were friends for we began our friendship and we clicked immediately. We were the same age, we had the same energy. He was from East London, I was from North London. We had a very similar upbringing. And he knew I was a jeweller, but he didn't know to what level I was at a jeweller. And it was only to one day that he could come up to my atelier one day because my masters had gone home early and I had to finish this tiara that I was working on. He saw the work that I was creating, and it was quite funny because he came into the atelier and I said, just wait for me because I have to finish work late. I have to finish this piece. It needs to go to the diamond setters in the morning. And he came to my bench, and you can imagine my atelier was it was quite Dickensian, it was very old and romantic, and these old wooden benches, and It was kind of like what I could imagine was what his Savile Row training apprenticeship was like. So he connected with my craft immediately because we had this similar training, but mine was in jewelry and his was in tailoring. And he came into the atelier and he was like, wow, it's lovely in here. And he saw this tiara that I was making, which converted into a necklace and a brooch and unscrewed, and we had been best friends for 2 years by this point, and he said, wow, is this what you're doing? And I said, yeah, I'm a jeweler. I've told you that the last 2 years. What do you think I was doing? And he said, yeah, but I didn't realize you made this stuff. And that was quite flattering. And then I think the idea triggered in his mind, and as you would know as well, Daphne, Lee was always ahead of the game, wasn't he? He was thinking 120 miles ahead of the rest of us, and he waited a while, and then 6 months later he said, I'd love you to work with me. I'm beginning to do my shows now. Would you work with me on my shows and make the jewelry for my shows? And at first, I'll be honest, I said no. I said, because you have to understand, I was a conditioned goldsmith. And the first thought that came into my mind was, no, Lee, how are we going to do that? You've just finished college. I've just finished my apprenticeship. How am I going to make big diamond jewelry, big diamond pieces for the shows? They'd have to be big, and, you know, you haven't got any money. I haven't got any money. How are we going to make these things? And then it was that moment my career changed, because Lee said to me, he said, no, we won't work in diamonds and gold. He said, Sean, I've seen what you do. If you just apply your skill to any medium, you can create anything. And I was still quite daunted by that fact. And I was, what do you mean? And he said, well, we can work in silver and brass and aluminium. I was a finely crafted goldsmith working for the royal family. The word aluminium and brass was not part of my vocabulary. And I took a breath and I said, aluminium, and maybe. And he said, Sean, it'd be amazing. He said, look what you can, he said, your skill, you have the talent, just apply it to another medium and you can create anything. And it was born, and it was an amazing moment for me, because I was a very conditioned goldsmith, and that moment just, it turned. It was as simple as that, just to think out of the box.
Well, this piece, for example, this piece, how did you envision this, and how did you work with Lee on this?
Well, this was one of the first, or the second, this was the second more body sculptural piece that I'd worked on. And this is a great example of showing you how he took me out of my comfort zone and helped me think out of the box and create the new.
Yes.
This piece, and what was amazing about working with Lee as well on the shows was it was a platform, it was it had total creative freedom. There was no commercial constraints, there was no boundaries, no limits, so we could create totally the new and push boundaries. And me and Lee, you'll see in some of our works, we always had a fascination with the cultural differences of body adornment. You know, like the Burmese net pieces, Maasai jewelry, how what would look grotesque to one is a vision of beauty to another, and we were fascinated with that. And I made for It's a Jungle Out There, and then after that, Bjork wore it for her album cover, the Burmese net pieces. Yes. And what I loved about working with Lee was that we'd made those beautiful pieces for those shows, and then how we worked sometimes is Lee would have an idea in his head of one piece, or he would ask me to design pieces he'd show me the collection, and I'd design pieces for the collection. But with the coil corset particularly, he came to me, and we were in the pub, because we were 24, 25, we were doing what early 20s do, we were having fun too, and he said, I think I know what I want for the next show. And I said, what was that? And he said, you know, you made the net piece for It's a Jungle Bjork. I said, I'd love you to make a whole torso. it was pushing, cultural body adornment to another level.
Yes.
But I think what was beautiful about working with Lee, and what me and Daphne did as well with the glove, is it was this fascination of the metal becoming the garment.
Yes.
It was this fusion of two worlds, of jewelry and fashion, becoming one. And Lee loved that. He loved to explore, and especially my arena was metalwork and goldsmithing and silversmithing.
And if I can jump in, also fashion jewelry and armor. And Daphne, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the importance of the vision of armor in your style, and also talk a little bit about how you first met Lee.
I met Lee, funnily enough, after Sean, because I met Sean, funnily enough. Isabella brought me to your atelier. Do you remember when I?
Yeah.
that was
a fun day.
Great. And but Alexander, I kept on thinking, because she kept on saying he's terribly kind of, he's a bit feisty, and he actually grabbed me one day when he saw me wearing one of his coats, and we went down to the pub too. And
yeah, that's what we do in London.
yeah, that's what we do in London. And then we started a sort of a very sort of intense kind of creative relationship as well, in a different way. And what I've always felt, I felt that with Alexander, and I also felt it with you and with other people I've worked with, was that they saw something kind of fragile about me, and in some way their art was trying to protect me. And I was always fascinated by armor.
Yes.
I would go to the Wallace collection, and I'd see pieces when I was a child at home or whatever, and I'd want to be a sort of knight in shining armor.
Yes.
I also thought it would be quite useful to have some protection against my horrible brothers and and the world at large, and the idea of being this sort of powerful person, looking person, even if you're sort of quivering inside. But in Sean and Lee and many other, well, not many, but a couple of other people, it was very much that sort of, we're going to protect you.
Yes.
It's that, and I tend to have ideas about things, and then we would start collaborating on things.
No, it was wonderful. It was to come in. It was a moment, wasn't it, when we were at the V&A, weren't we? And we were at the. I wish I could remember.
I can't remember either.
We was at the opening of
Something.
a fashion exhibition at the V&A. Really wish I could remember what that was. I have a feeling it was Vivienne Westwood, but there was me, you, and Lee, weren't we? And the crowds. It was so busy.
It was so busy, and people like us, we sort of like being in our studios, or
Yeah,
sort of like
and
quite, a lot of people. It's not really.
And I remember everybody wanted to speak to you and to Lee, and I remember that moment. I remember like you saying, I need protection, I need armor, and
Let's make something.
And it's when those moments of like, and then there's three people standing there, and Lee was like, God, yeah, you should, and you make the glove, and I'll make a dress, and it was like we used to get on this. It's just, I think we would just. What I loved about working with you, and what I loved about working with Lee and Isabella, and it's just like-minded minds that are just fearless about wanting to create the new and to push boundaries and
sort of starting off on a journey with a sort of complete conviction that we were going to do this. Once the idea is there, it's very much we're going to see this through to the very end, and
no matter how long it
no matter
the glove
how long
took
it
4.5 years to make.
Yeah.
And I think you had 20 fittings.
Yes.
I mean, that's couture. I mean, that's like... but
you cast my arm.
we cast...
Keep going.
There should be some images, actually.
Some wonderful images of the glove here. We'll just walk through some of the shows. And what is this made of?
Silver.
Silver.
So this was, and this was the vertebrae corset that was the first piece the first more body sculptural piece that I made with Lee. when he did ask me to make that, then I thought
That
he
was-
was crazy, because I thought, how am I going to make something like that?
Yeah.
But I said, you need a sculptor. But then it was so simple, because Lee would challenge, he wouldn't challenge you, he'd make you challenge yourself.
Yes.
And he'd say, oh, that's it. And I said, I can't make that. And he said, well, that's a shame, because if you did, you would have executed it so beautifully. So the gauntlet was thrown.
Right.
You know, he was like
Yeah.
that. And I couldn't sleep for 3 days thinking, how am I going to make this thing? And then I'd have a light bulb moment. I think, I know how I'm going to do it. And it was so simple as I said to him, you need a sculptor. And then it dawned on me, I am a sculptor.
Yes. Yes.
I had been carving rings out of wax and casting them in gold and platinum for years. I just had to think bigger. And he kind of would say, kind of told you. And so it was...
Well, and the whole use of body parts too. I mean, both with the corset, which is kind of an animal-human hybrid, and then the jawbone.
The jawbone, yeah, the jawbone was really beautiful. For this show, what we wanted to do, there's nothing more beautiful than the bone structure of an animal, or a mammal, or a human. It's a fascinating structure. And we wanted to take that beauty and put it on the outside of the body. It's kind of like playing with different space and reflecting on what is beautiful but is unseen.
But it's also kind of a memento mori. I mean, this idea, like those 18th century and Renaissance carvings of a living person, and then on the other side of the person, it's a skeleton.
Yeah, exactly. There was a lot of that from my antique restoration as well of the Victorian period. So a lot of my antique restoration work would come out in the later works. That's why me and Lee did a lot of jewelry with hair. We did a lot of pieces with hair because of the memorabilia. So this was the net piece, which went on a very long journey. It was in 4 shows, because Lee loved this piece so much. So I adapted it for many different shows. The coil corset again. And what I loved about that, she was actually screwed into that piece, so she was encased into it. And what I love about what me and Lee did was we would take, this was a formidable structure. It was like armor. I mean, maybe this is the next piece of armor, Dan. Yeah. And it, but yet, it really celebrated the beauty of the female form.
Yes.
So there was this balance of something so hard, but yet so sensual and so beautiful.
Yes.
And that's what we tried to do.
Well, it's an exoskeleton. You'd worked
Yeah.
with skeletons before, and here this is on the outside. It also reminds me so much of all that imagery, war imagery, where the outer body has to be hard to protect the kind of soft, vulnerable inner body, which in wartime is a physical body, but as you were saying, Daphne, it's also psychological, the need for psychological protection.
That's correct.
I remember when we did your show, and you talked about how you thought if you were dressed in an extraordinary way, somehow it protected you. People almost didn't dare speak to you, which reminded me of Lee saying how he designed clothes so that people will be afraid to lay a finger on the woman wearing them.
That's true.
Yeah.
It create a kind of fear or awe.
And then you wonder why you don't have any friends.
Only like-minded friends. We just go around protecting each other with our skill.
Oh my God.
Again,
yes.
if you look at the work, I suppose there's something so much in common with me, you, Lee, and Isabella.
Yes.
I mean, everything was about protection, but it was beautiful. It was
beautiful.
about be protected, but bringing the beauty within.
Because that's also so light.
Yeah, it's so light. That's made from aluminium. I mean, he got his way in the end. I ended up working in aluminium.
Well, but each piece looks like some kind of Victorian brooch. I mean, it's all, on the one hand, it's completely modern, but you can see how you've taken all of these techniques and design elements from the past.
Yeah, and then it was actually, Lee actually showed me an anti-Ottoman belt that he had.
Yes.
And I went to the studio and he showed me the belt. He said, "Do you see this belt?" And I said, "It was beautiful." And he said, this is how we worked. And he just said, "Can you make me something like this belt that covers the whole girl?"
Yes. And did he say face mask as
Face,
well?
everything, yeah. I want her covered totally. And he so trusted my aesthetic and my execution that he saw it a day before the show.
Wow.
That's how we worked.
and then going to, again, to these fierce, which even in your regular jewelry, there's an element of the sort of fierceness, spikes and claws.
Well, again, I think it's like what we're talking about today. For me, there, if you can imagine, by day I was creating, because when I was creating all these pieces, I was still working for the atelier that I worked for. So by day I was making tiaras and big diamond chandelier earrings. And then by night I was making pieces like this that are really strong. But with my line, it was this, you have a big diamond chandelier earring, which is beautiful in its own right, its intricacy, its delicacy, its use of materials. But it has a different message. But then when I created this fine line, it was a very simple line, but it was quite strong and protective. It's just as powerful in a different way. And I think there's a protection in my work as well. I think it's, again, you can see that running through everything.
Well, and Daphne, you've got, of course, an amazing collection of jewelry. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what's drawn you to jewelry. I'll never forget when we worked on our show together about how when it came time to style it, you started taking off your diamonds and pinning them on mannequins. And I had to say, no real diamonds in the show. And you said, this is rather a poor diamond. And I'm like, read my lips, no real diamonds. So your assistant got fake ones.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, I use a lot of both. I mean, it's just a question of you can wear the sort of same thing again and again, but the idea of something lightening up the back, or
like your piece here.
This piece here, or you can make the simplest thing look completely different with a ribbon, with a little brooch on it, with a sort of like it gives light to the face. What drew me, the craftsmanship of jewelry, the kind of the alchemist stone, you know, the kind of that whole. There's something mysterious about jewelry and stones and what they signify, because obviously they're going to be around for far longer than any of us. I mean, they're sort of permanent things, and I don't know. They're very. To me, it's very magical. Jewelry. There's a lot of magic infused in stones.
Well, and you look at the pieces you have now, on your arm, it's the Cartier from the 20s, and then you have the sort of very fierce warrior-like rings, and so it's a real juxtaposition.
It's a mixture, yeah. It's a mixture.
Oops, I'm going to go back to that one.
So this was the pheasant claw and Tahitian pearl necklace, and I think what's fascinating about this piece for me is, with me and Lee, when we worked together, we were always trying to fuse different materials and play with different materials and see the beauty in each material for its own right. And this is a real extreme of materials. It's pheasant's claws with grade A Tahitian pearls. So it was taking something that was so classically traditional in jewelry, which was these beautiful pearls, and then fusing it with pheasant's claws. And again, I had to self-teach myself taxidermy.
Yes.
So not only had I'd gone from goldsmith, silversmith to blacksmith,
right,
taxidermy.
Right.
So yeah, it was but again, it had a 1920s feel to this piece. So I was again bringing in my kind of Art Deco restoration days with the kind of the flapper dresses, and I wanted these long strands of pearls, but it's kind of a macabre elegance.
It is a macabre elegance. Tell the story about how when you were learning taxidermy, you frightened someone in your house.
Oh my God, do you know that story? Oh my goodness. Yeah, so okay, this is quite a funny story. So I don't know if you've heard this one, Daphne. So the beautiful thing about working with Lee was the exploration of materials and the journey of creating something new, and the excitement and the achievement. So when we came up with this design, you know, we had all these beautiful pearls. We were sponsored by a Tahitian pearl company, and we came up with the idea of fusing it with pheasant's claws. And we were on this train, and we're like, yeah, it'd be amazing. I can drape them through like 19s, 20s feel. I'll make earrings and da-da-da-da. I hadn't even questioned where I was going to get these pheasant claws from at this point. You know, we thought out of the box first. And I always believe you need to create the new and the beautiful, you need to think out of the box first and then come back. And then to the logistics. And then it just happens. I believe in energy and the things that are right, and it happens. And then our friend Simon's parents owned a gaming farm in Hungerford, quite apt. So he spoke to his father and he said, yeah, byproduct, he has all the pheasants that he supplies to all the local butchers, and he'll give me the claws. And I don't know why in my head I thought I was going to get all these lovely claws already formed and shaped. But I had a big bin bag delivered to me, and
A bloody, horrible pheasant
150 claws, all limp and ligaments and skin. And so then I studied taxidermy, and I wired them all up, and I got trays and trays of salt to dry them out, but they needed to be in a warm space for 6 to 8 weeks to dry. And I was living in a flat at the time, but my mother had a very large airing cupboard in her house. So I went to my mother's and I said, Mum, do you mind if I store all of these in your airing cupboard? Trays and trays. And you can imagine all these white salt and all these claws hanging, like rows of claws. It was really beautiful. It looked really, actually really quite lovely. And then, she said, they're for Lee, right? I said, yeah. She said, oh, you too, like, you know. And they went into the airing cupboard, and then unnoticed, and there they stayed until my mother's cleaner came.
Oh, dear.
And she went to the airing cupboard to get the towels out and everything, and she, at that point, she thought my mother was a voodoo witch. And she ran for the hills, never to be seen again. Yeah, she left. She thought my mum... I can't believe you know that story.
Oh, my God.
Me and Lee nicknamed it the voodoo necklace.
Oh, and this, of course, is also another splendid, fierce porcupine quills?
Porcupine quills, yeah. So again, taking a really beautiful element of nature. Nature is such a beautiful subject to use and create in jewelry, because it's such a fleeting moment and there's such a fragility and strength in nature, and the porcupine quills are perfect for that.
And this one, what is this made of? Silver?
This is pure silver, but this is an electroforming technique. So Lee was always very much about pushing and exploring new techniques, as he encouraged me to in my arena. And this, I carved all of this out of wax, and then it was electroformed with pure silver. So it's like a really heavy, heavy plating. So it meant for us, then there were endless possibilities, because it was light,
Yes.
but it was beautiful. It was made from silver, and so we could. And so now the glove.
And so now we're coming to this story of this collaboration. And I know you were telling me that Lee had said to you, how come it's taking you so long? But tell about how you started the collaboration and what journeys you went through making this.
Should you begin?
No, you begin.
So I suppose it was that moment when we were all together, and Daphne said, I need protecting, I need armour, and it was that moment where an idea is born and an energy is born, and I suppose
We didn't let it go.
we didn't let it go, and we were of a time. It was when there was such a lovely energy, wasn't there? And Izzy was there around, and Lee and us, and we were just all about pushing boundaries and creating the new and creating there was no limits.
No.
And our minds were quite free, so...
So what came first, the idea of an armored glove?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very Horace Walpole.
Yes, exactly. The idea was, the armored glove. I mean, I think we even started talking about like the whole body.
It was, wasn't it? It started with the arm, and then it was the shoulder, and then we were going to take it up, weren't we? And even up to the neck
sort
at
of
some
like,
point.
sort of, slightly kind of like the half of the,
Yes.
the
Of
The
head.
face, yeah, I remember.
But when you go far, like what we said, the actual execution, when we started, then we realised that actually it was, going to be quite a long,
Complicated.
because it was, had to be made in 3 pieces.
Yeah.
It's you.
So, I think, so initially the idea was born, and that's where all great things come. The idea was born, and there was an energy between us, and Lee got involved, didn't he? He was like, I'd make the dress, and then I had to design the piece, and I think for me, it had begun, and the idea was there, and we said, right, let's do this. And then I went away, and I was traveling with Lee, and I was in India, and I remember studying this building, and there was hundreds of birds on the rooftop. And I'm looking, and then all of a sudden they would lift, and they'd fly around this building in a mass block, and it was beautiful to see, and then they would land on the roof again, and I was like, wow, that was beautiful. It was only a few minutes of flying. Then they did it again, and then I noticed there were predators, there was eagles in the distance, so they were flocking together to create a mass in the sky as to warn off predators.
A defensive mechanism.
Defensive mechanism, and then that was where the idea came for me to design the birds flying around Daphne's arm. So it was this form of a detailed protection within the glove, you know, because Daphne wanted the glove, she wanted the protection, the armour, but I wanted to put a detail in there that was another concept, another layered concept. So it was the birds, that's why the birds, they're flying around the arm as a form of protection.
And how did you think of doing it chainmail? Because of course there are different kinds of armor, plate and chainmail.
Yeah, chainmail always appealed to me because it's lighter and more flexible. I'd always liked the idea of sort of Joan of Arc and the idea of chainmail and sort of King Arthur, and it appealed to all the books that I'd read as a child and continue to do. It's sort of that feeling, and I wanted to. I mean, like there's some of the things that I kind of wanted to put small kind of hints of past lives in there, so that we did put 1 or 2 things that were actually from, because it's like that one that's flying away.
Yes.
The one there with the pear-shaped robe with the
Mm-hmm.
oval rose cut in the body. Because they were from older pieces that you owned, weren't they? So Daphne wanted to put some of these older pieces that she had.
To transform the karma.
So that's important. So you actually deconstructed some of your older pieces to have them incorporated into the glove.
1 or 2, yeah.
Yes.
1 or 2.
And how else did you access the materials? And what decisions did you make about, for example, the nails and the piece which is hard
lots and lots
across
of
it?
meetings.
We had lots of meetings.
I'm sure, for years.
And I mean, it took
right?
4.5 years to make. And I think what was beautiful about it was we began, and I crafted it in silver. Remember, we crafted it in silver first, in silver to get all the moulds right, to get the fit right, and then the arm piece, because it comes in 2 bits. The hand comes apart, and so the sleeve can be put on first, and then the hand clips on afterwards. And we made it in silver first, but then we realised that silver is a beautiful, noble metal, but it's softer than gold. So we then had to make the structure in gold so it could support movement. And it was such an organic process, wasn't it? So we made it in gold, and we went from piece to piece, and then I made all the fingernails, and
And there was the articulations.
Articulation, yeah. So we had to cast. To begin,
multiple pieces.
we had to cast Daphne's. I think you'll see it in the next slide. I think, yeah, we had to cast Daphne's arm in concrete first.
Yes.
So I had 2 rubber arms and a concrete arm and a concrete hand. There were parts of Daphne's arm all over my workshop. It was fascinating. It looked amazing. It looked like some
a mad scientist.
Mad scientist's atelier. But we had to cast it in concrete first so we could forge and bend the gold around. But then we had to do it in rubber, as Daphne said, because we needed to, as we were making it, we needed to put it on a rubber arm and see what its movement was like. And you had 20 fittings, didn't you?
Oh my God.
It was great.
It was amazing. It was a great journey, and it was a creative journey, and every time we met, it evolved, didn't it? There was going to be 1 nail in diamonds, and then it looked so amazing. And then I think, I mean, the 17 craftsmen touched this piece.
Wow.
17 craftsmen touched the piece in all. And I think it not only did it take a journey in its own involvement in design and making, for us there was an important part because two very dear people that were part of that journey we lost. You know, Isabella was really excited about the glove, and then we lost Isabella, and Lee was really excited about the glove and creating the dress for the opening, and Lee had a part in the design as well, didn't he? So Lee put some input into the design, and then sadly we lost Lee. So I think and it was Daphne that said to me, we have to carry on this energy and that, you know, that innovation and that fearless innovation that Lee and Izzy had. So it was then the glove became an art form.
Yes.
It became something else, didn't it?
It became something else. It became a kind of, and also it was something that glued us together, because when all of that was going on, it was a way for us to keep in contact, and we had something physical that we were creating that had started off. I mean, it became something different, but it was one way that we didn't lose touch, you know.
Yeah, it was. It was a real.
And then, you know, it's strange because, the title Against the World, and it was like, I mean, I think we were all against the world
At the time,
for a while,
yeah. At the time, it's quite.
It's funny how it was very poetical, really, the whole thing, and you know, it started out as something, but the meaning that's infused in the end is sort of, I mean, it's very, very sad, but it's also, we did it, we made it, and it's full of joy because it exists.
Well, and you've done a lot of performances in it too. The one in London, for example. You want to talk about that?
Well, that was, you know, I thought, well, you know, what was very strange about it, and this happened so many times during that period, that like on specific days, because I'd you know, I had lots of things in the works at Lee's workshop, and which would be being delivered sort of actually even up to sort of a year and a half after he died. Things would suddenly, I'd get a box from McQueen and I'd think, what's in this? You know, sort of like things that had stacked up.
Like letters from a dead friend.
There was one of those cat suits that sort of turned up, and I'd been shooting with Nick Knight that day, and Jay Jopling said, let's, you know, we'll do the exhibition of the glove in my hall. And I'd been shooting with Nick Knight the day before, and I had this Perspex box which we'd been using for other purposes, and I thought, well, actually, that's a brilliant idea. So I got, I sort of thought, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to walk around with the glove. That's just lame. I mean, it's just like, what am I going to do? Go, hi, I've got to, you know, just it was infused with more of a kind of melancholy by that stage as well. I mean, it would have been a different performance if Lee had been alive, but actually since the whole thing had become more of a kind of like a sort of Sleeping Beauty type thing, I thought that the best thing to do is just to sort of lie in state, really. Yeah. So I got some cushions, lots of pillows, and it was actually funny enough, it was Amanda, you and Gareth Pugh who were installing them all on the top of this box, and then I said, I've got a bunch of kind of veils. So I was living next door, so I pulled them out of the cupboard, and I said, I'm just going to lie here. So Jay looked at okay,
it was an amazing presentation.
It was really, and it looked like I was sort of floating.
Yeah.
It was, but it was really like, I didn't think about it because I was I'd come out of a long shoot. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew I wasn't going to walk around with a glove on.
It was amazing. So I remember, I mean,
I had to lie there for like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, 4 or 5 hours. You lay there, and it was obviously the launch of the glove, and it was just. But what I remember is it was totally your idea, and it was such a beautiful way to present. I mean, how do you launch something like that? No one had ever made a glove like that. You know, my peers had congratulated us on pushing the boundaries in high-end fine jewelry, and in itself, it was a very beautiful, innovative thing to create. But to launch it, I had no idea. And then when you came up with, came up with the idea, and Daphne said, "I want to be lying in state. I want to look like I'm floating, and I want to lie there, wearing the glove." And it was beautiful on this perspex table. You were laying there draped in all this lace, and it covered your face, and the glove was there. But then my fear, there was candles. Remember, there were candles all around the bed. And I just kept thinking, as people came in, the lace would waft on the candle, and I was just like... But, you know, but the best beautiful things have created from adrenaline and fear.
And sort of like, well, how do we do this? I hadn't really thought about it. It was like, it just was a happy alignment of things.
It was so beautiful, and I remember people coming in because Jay Joplin presented it in his home. I think he
thought I'd gone stark raving mad.
Yeah, he thought the piece was a piece of art, and he loved it. He loved the idea of lining state, and lots of people came, and it was beautiful. And I remember Susie Menkes coming in and standing with me, and she was speechless. Do you remember she was standing? And Daphne, you were so brilliant. Daphne didn't speak to anybody. She just lay in state, literally for 4 hours. And do you remember Tom Ford came in and tickled your feet?
Yeah, exactly.
He tried to tickle you, didn't he, to get a reaction from you?
Oh, God.
And Susie stood there and said, I've never seen anything so beautiful.
It really is an incredible masterpiece and the product of an incredible creative collaboration. So I think we've almost run out of time. So if you would thank my guests and then might a question or two.
Thank you, Valerie.
I think we still have 1 or 2 minutes for questions. Yeah, absolutely. Someone in red?
Pardon?
A way to view the glove. Yes, at Christie's. When will they be able to go in and see it?
Yes, the glove will be on view at Sotheby's.
Sotheby's, sorry.
That's okay. On the 30th of November. So from the 30th of November, there'll be an exhibition of my life's works at Sotheby's, and then there'll be an auction on the 4th of December.
Over here? No? Someone else?
There's one here, the maroon jacket.
Hi, my name is Kayla. I'm from the High School Fashion Industries. I've followed Alexander McQueen almost all my life, and I've loved the jewelry that you've made for him. So I was wondering, out of your lifetime's work, like working with this brand, what was your most mesmerizing piece that inspired you to continue on with these creative pieces?
So the piece that the most, I think the coiled corset was definitely my favorite piece, or in a way I think that piece for me then, that made me realize that there was endless possibilities of what we could do and what I could create. And I think there was an element there where I worked with Lee for 17 years and we were best friends for 25 years. And when we created the coil corset, I understood him from the beginning, but not 100%. But when we did the coil corset, I got it. Because he really did push. That was his idea. I executed it, but it was his idea. But I got him then because he really pushed. He wanted to take this tradition of coiled net pieces that's hundreds and hundreds of years tradition, but he wanted to change it and he wanted to push it further. And I got it then, and I got him. And then I knew through his visions and his drive and his passion and my execution and my energy too, because we were very similar, we could create anything. So I think that was a piece for me.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Great. Hi, I'm Jennifer.
Hi.
Incredibly inspiring presentation. Thank you. I wanted just to ask you, I know you said that we're going to see your life's work at Sotheby's, but how do you plan on continuing your next work? Are you going to continue doing couture pieces, or do you think you'll do more commercial, or are you taking some time off?
Oh gosh, no, not. I have no intention of taking any time off yet soon. I have many facets to what I do. the work I did with McQueen was 17 years of work, and I still create collections and beautiful bespoke one-off pieces. I still actually make tiaras, believe it or not. And I have a house, the Shawneen House in Bond Street in London, where we create beautiful one-off pieces. But Lee taught me to always think out of the box and to take my skill as a craftsman and as a designer and evolve with it. So I worked in fashion with Lee, and I've worked with some of the beautiful, fine, large houses in the world. But I like to apply my art to different arenas. So I've actually moved into architecture now. So jewelry fundamentally is my love and my passion and what I do every day, but we've moved into architecture. So my first building will be launched next year. So we've moved into designing bronze works, and I've designed the facade of a very large building in Kensington. It's 60 luxury apartments, and the whole facade of the building is made from bronze. And so it's about taking a skill and just applying it, as Lee taught me that day when he said, you can work in aluminium or brass, and I was highly insulted as a goldsmith, but he taught me that you just have to think out of the box. So now I'm moving into architecture, and I intend to go on and work in many different arenas and apply my handwriting and my signature to whatever arena comes up, because I love collaborating, as I did with Daphne. I love the new energy. I love learning new things. I love exploring things. I'd never worked in chainmail before until me and Daphne worked together. I'd never made a diamond glove. No one ever has. But, you know, I think through collaborations, you get a fusion of you get new energies coming together, and then that's when something totally unique and new is born. So I intend to carry on. Retirement, not yet. One day, but not yet.
Well, now as Daphne moves more and more into music, maybe she'll be able to incorporate you into some kind of a music, fashion, jewelry, architecture collaboration.
That. Yeah, I mean, we already started talking about more things to do, haven't we?
Maybe just one more? There was somebody over there, yes.
Well, she actually asked the question that I was going to ask, but then, and this has been wonderful, really, thank you. So Daphne, what is your future hold for you?
My future, I'm just at the end of, I've mastered, and I'm just mixing a new album that I've written and composed, so that will be out in March. So I've, designing things for that. I'm working on visuals for that, and I'll be going on tour.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Going on tour.
And I'd like to just add one thing. I've been in the fashion industry, and then I was in the movie business, and I've been working with universities, and it's been quite an interesting experience, and your stories need to be told to the new force of creativity that's coming up, because what I've experienced is a lack of them understanding the history that is so rich, that is part of that creative collaboration. And I hope that you can continue to spread your stories to new creativity that is happening, because again, those stories are so rich. And I know that you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. I think that, the richest things I've ever done have been in collaboration with other people, and also, I've been incredibly lucky with the people that have come into my life, like Valerie, like Sean, like Lee, like my producer at the moment, Tony Visconti, or whoever. It's the sort of you find like-minded people, but it's like. It's those fusions of souls, things don't get made on their own, but it's the belief that it can happen, and the kind of what was extraordinary about working with truly great people is I've found that their egos are healthy, but you know, they're not overpowering. And that's what we had a really good time doing what we do, and that's when you have that openness to kind of explore things, and the love. I mean, there's been a lot of love that's gone into all of these things, and I think that that's important to share, because sometimes when if you're having to sort of collaborate because you have to do it, and it sort of doesn't work. But you know, when it comes out of something joyful, then I think it works.
Thank you
That's the
so
key
much.
about collaboration. I mean, it can be a nightmare, or when Daphne collaborated on her book and show at FIT, every person in the museum just said, she was the best person to work with ever. When can we do another show with Daphne? So we're talking about trying to plan another one, because everyone loved working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.